Hey game devs, I'm Robin and this is BitBirdie, and today I'm finally going to show you how to create this dash effect. So in this video, I'm going to go over the actual dash as well as this ghost effect. And in the next video, I'm going to go over the dust trail and the dust burst. The GitHub repo for part 1 will be in the description below if you want to check it out. We're going to start off in a little starter project containing a player that can run around and an obstacle that will cause it to print ouch when you collide with it. We're eventually going to be able to dash past this obstacle without it hurting you. So the first thing we're going to do is go into our project settings and add dash to our input map. I've added it here as the right click on the mouse, but you can make it whatever you want. Now let's go ahead and create a scene for our dash. And give it a script as well. Let's rename this to dash. And give it a child node of timer. Call this the duration timer. And this timer will be for the actual duration of the dash. So here we have the start dash function, and it's actually going to take in a duration from the player because it's pretty useful to have all the stats within the player in case, you get a power up that changes your dash duration. You want that contained in the player, not the dash itself. We're going to take our duration and set that to the duration timer's wait time. So that's just this thing right here. And then we're going to start the timer. We have this function here that the player can call to see if we're still dashing. And that's going to be before the timer has stopped or run out. Let's go into the player script now and actually add the dash. So I've added a few things here, the dash speed, dash duration, and a reference to the dash object, which we're going to put as a child of the player. We've also added these couple lines right here. If the dash action was just pressed, so that's when I click the right mouse button, it's going to be true for 1 frame. Then take our dash and call the start dash function, passing in our dash duration. So we want to change this player's speed when we're dashing. So the speed for this frame is going to be the dash speed if we are dashing. Else it's going to be the move speed, which is the default move speed we'd have up here. And then we're going to use speed for the velocity. Okay, so let's actually add the dash to the player scene now and see what it looks like so far. Oh, okay, so it looks like we're dashing, but then we're never stopping the dash. And this is actually because in our dash scene, we have not checked this one shot. So when the duration timer times out, it'll actually restart again forever unless you have this checked off. Okay, let's see what it looks like. All right, so it seems to be working properly now. We're only dashing for the duration of the dash, but we still will get hurt by this obstacle even when we dash through it. So let's fix that. Let's just go into the player script. Here we have a function that's connected to the hurtbox's area enter signal. The simplest way for the player to not get hurt is literally just having if we're dashing, then return. So this line will never get run, and you probably have something like this if you were working in a real project where there was actually a health system. Let's test that out really quickly. So I'm getting hurt if I just run through the obstacle, but if I dash through, I don't get hurt. There's one more thing we need to do to complete the actual dash portion of this tutorial. So right now, if I just spam the dash button, I can just dash infinitely. And we don't want that. We want to have sort of a delay between dashes where you can't actually dash again. So let's go to our dash script and add some stuff. All right, so I've added this constant called dash delay, which is going to be the time between dashes where you can't dash again. And I have this variable called can dash, which the player will be able to access. And finally, this function end dash, which will set can dash to false right when we're done dashing. This line is going to stop function execution. Then it's going to create a timer with a wait time of dash delay. So 0.4 seconds. And then when that timer's timeout is called, it's gonna continue function execution. So it'll set can dash back to true. So really what this is doing is when the dash ends, it's gonna set can dash to false for 0.4 seconds before setting it back to true. Now we need something to actually call end dash, and that's gonna be the duration timer's timeout signal. There we go. Now we need to go into the player and actually prevent them from dashing when can dash is false. So we'll add it to this line right here. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay, so it looks like it sort of works, but not really. That's because we've forgotten to actually add another condition. So what's happening is we're starting another dash before the previous dash is ending. And that's why you can still sort of get that infinite dash if you spam it fast enough. So if the dash is dashing already, don't start another dash. Don't restart that duration timer. Okay, it looks like we can no longer spam the dash. There's always a consistent gap between dashes. Now that we finished the actual dash, let's go ahead and make that ghost effect. So I'm going to go ahead and create the dash ghost scene, which is going to be a sprite with a child of tween. Let's give it a script. So what we want the dash ghost to do is, as soon as it's instantiated, we basically just want it to fade out. So during the dash, there's going to be a bunch of dash ghosts instantiated at the player's position, which is going to kind of leave a trail of dash ghosts, which are all fading out one by one. So what's going on here? We're getting our tween node, and we're calling interpolate property on modulate.a on self. So what's this modulate.a? Well, if you go into visibility and modulate, it's this a value here, which is the alpha. So let me just demonstrate what that is by putting a texture into this sprite. We'll use good old icon.png. So we're basically taking this a value and interpolating it down to 0. So 1 is the initial value, 0 is the final value, 0.5 is the time it takes to get from 1 to 0, so the duration. 3 is the transition type, and 1 is the ease type. So what a transition type is basically the shape of the curve that we want to interpolate by. And the ease type is how we're entering that curve. Here's a handy diagram of what all these curves look like for the transition types. I'm using transquart, so this one right over here. And I kind of just played around with a few of these just to see what I liked the best. The ease types are pretty self-explanatory. And I'll have this diagram linked in the description below. Okay, so let's just play the scene and we should see icon.png just fade out as soon as it runs. Okay, so it's trying to call interpolate property on null. And that is because I've assigned the script to the wrong node here. I assigned it to the tween when it should have been the dash ghost. So let's just take that off. And we will drag the dash ghost onto the dash ghost. Make this extend to sprite instead of a tween. Let's see if it works. Okay, so you saw it really fast right there. I realized that it didn't actually show up at all in the video because it just faded so fast. So I'm just gonna increase this duration to 2 seconds and then show you. Okay, so I'm sure you can see that right there. The next thing we want to do is when it fades out, so when the tween ends, we just want to destroy this object. Let's go into the node, tween completed. Let's connect that. Queue free, which destroys the object. And that's it for the dash ghost. Now we just have to go into our dash and spawn a bunch of dash ghosts as we're dashing. So we can start by adding a reference to our ghost scene. And then we start the dash, let's call this instance ghost function, which will just instance a ghost and add it to the main scene. We're basically doing this so that the dash ghost isn't influenced by the player's position after it's spawned. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so basically you're seeing our icon PNG up here, spawn and then fade away. That's a good start. Now what we actually want to do is get the player's sprite and get the current animation frame and use that as the sprite for the dash ghost and spawn that at the position that the player is in that moment of the dash. This means that we're going to have to pass the player's sprite into the dash right over here. So here we have a new member variable called sprite, and we're now passing in a sprite in the start dash function, and we're just going to assign that sprite to our member variable here. So what's going on here? We're assigning the global position of the dash to the ghost scene, and that's going to match the player's position because the dash is a child of the player, and I haven't adjusted the transform at all. And then we're getting that sprite, which was passed in by the player here, and assigning its texture to our ghost's texture. And we're also assigning all the relevant animation details so that the ghost looks exactly like the player at that moment in the dash. Now we got to go into the player and make sure that we pass in the sprite right here. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so we have like one instance of the ghost. So that's pretty cool. But we actually want to spawn a whole bunch of dash ghosts all throughout the dash. To do that, let's start by adding another timer to our dash. And we'll call this one ghost timer. We'll just set the wait time here because we're never going to change it. And this is going to be the time between each ghost spawn. So let's go ahead and connect the timeout signal. And we'll just call instance ghost. We want to start this timer when we start our dash. So let's add the timer here. And start the timer right over here. So this time we want to make sure that the one shot is not checked because we want the timer to keep restarting over and over again throughout the dash until the dash ends. So at end dash, we can actually also stop it here. Let's see if that worked. So our ghost effect is working now. But if you remember at the beginning of the tutorial, the player and the ghost were actually white while they were dashing. Well, the player wasn't completely white, but the dash ghosts were. So let's do that now. Let's go to our dash ghost scene, and let's add a shader to our dash ghost. This shader is almost exactly the same as the one I used in my Hurtbox tutorial, so for better explanation, you can go watch just the first part of that one. The only difference here is that I have this mix weight variable instead of having it hard-coded here, and the mix weight determines how white you're going to make your texture. So in the shader params, if I turn whiten to true, you'll see it go completely white here. We're actually going to keep it like this because the dash ghost is always going to be completely white. Now let's just save these resources. And let's also make these unique as well, so that they don't interfere when we're using this shader or material elsewhere. Let's see what that looks like now. Okay, so the ghost effect is sort of working, but the ghost is showing up on top of the player. We can fix this by lowering the z-index to -1. There we go, that looks better. Now all we have to do is make the player white as well. We're going to go into the player scene and add that whitened material into the player sprite. Right into there. Oh, and let's make sure that this is not on. Just going to double check that, yes, this is still white, so we're not sharing that resource anymore because we made them unique. Now let's go back to our dash script. Okay, so when we start our dash, we want to set that mix weight shader param to something that's not completely white. And then we'll set whiten to true. And then down here, we'll set whiten back to false when we end the dash so that the player isn't white anymore. Let's see if that worked. Okay, looks like we finished part 1 of our dash tutorial. So in the next video, I'm going to be showing you the dust trails and the dust burst. I'm hoping to get that video released in a couple days from now. I hope that tutorial was helpful for some of you. Here's what the dash looks like in action in my own game that I'm developing. If this looks cool to you, you might want to consider checking out my channel for devlogs and more tutorials like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.